I'm sure you can hear me just fine, I bet. Okay, so we're gonna get into it. All right, you hear me, perfect. So first of all, thank you for joining me on this kombucha journey. This is a big celebration because I officially launched my kombucha making course, which I spent months making. I wanted to really create the most comprehensive kombucha course on the entire internet because I wanted all the information in one place. This is my favorite beverage to brew at home. It's so simple to brew, and it will save you so much money. It's great for you. Drinking kombucha, I consume this daily, and I feel great. It's helped my digestion. And there's so much experimentation, which is awesome. And another reason I created the course, so we could really get into the experimenting. But of course, the journey for brewing kombucha, there's a lot of steps. There's a lot of different elements to master. And I wanted to get on here and answer all of your questions because I've been putting out a lot of kombucha content in the last few months. And I'm sure I've seen a lot of you have brewed kombucha at home. Thousands of you have brewed kombucha at home, a lot of successful kombucha brewing, but I've also seen a lot of the same questions, and I'm here to answer your questions that you might have along the brewing process, because kombucha is new. It's probably new for a lot of you. Fermentation is a wild journey. You're doing something that you've probably never done before. There's microbiology, there's weird things growing, there's weird smells, weird tastes, weird sights. I've got all of my scobies and my kombucha brewing kits back there. And the first time I brewed kombucha, I was overwhelmed. So I'm here to help you out on the journey. So let's get into some questions. We're gonna start with Olivia. Do you leave one? And two, fermentation on same temperature, and how long do I need for fermentation? Will it carbonate? Okay, so a little hard to understand that question, but I think I get what you're saying. Basically, you're talking about the fermentation process with carbonation, and that's one of the trickiest parts about kombucha brewing is how long do you let it ferment? Because when it comes to kombucha, there's no like meter or reader or recipe that's going to tell you when to stop fermenting, when to carbonate your kombucha, and it's something that you need to figure out on your own. So generally, when it comes to kombucha, the average fermentation time is around 7 days. It could be less, it could be longer. 7 to 10 days, especially if you're a beginner brewer and you're just starting up your culture and it's not super strong yet, it's going to be around 7 to 10 days till it's ready to put into these bottles, just like I have here. So you can see in here, this is a crazy brew that I've been experimenting with. It's an oolong tea. So generally for beginner brewers, you use a black tea. That's probably what you're used to. That's also what you're probably tasting in stores because most manufacturers use black tea. It's a little easier. I suggest it for beginners. This right here is an oolong. You can see it's a little lighter in color. Of course, it's not a black tea, it's a lighter tea. And then I flavored this one with melon and jalapeno. And then I had one earlier. Alex, where was that one? The peach over there. Yeah, there was a peach. And then, yeah, you can grab that. And a Concord grape. So when it comes to the fermentation, I let this sit for around 7 days. And it's all about tasting it and smelling it to understand the proper fermentation cycle. So if you're, you know what, I'm going to go over here real quick and get some kombucha right out of here. So this kombucha has been fermenting.
You're a bit quiet.
Yeah, I'm a bit quiet.
Yeah.
Okay.
They said to get closer to the mic.
All right. Let's see if we can bring it a little closer. All right. How does that sound? Sorry, this is my first time live streaming on here with the DSLR, so I'm still figuring this stuff out. I'll talk as loud as possible. So we've got our fermented kombucha. I'm smelling it right now, super sour. I taste that, and it's super vinegary because it's been sitting, it's been
freaking like-
fermenting for like 14 days. And when you go to bottle carbonate, it's all about finding that balance. You still want a little bit of sweetness in there because the sugar in the kombucha, the residual sugar that you brew it with, that's gonna help the actual carbonation process. And you're really trying to find that perfect balance because you don't want it too sweet or then it's just sweetened tea. You're not gonna get the health benefits from those healthy acids of the kombucha. So right here, this is a little too sour. I've been letting that go for way too long because I've been busy. So you're really trying to get that balance, not too sweet, not too sour, somewhere right in between. It shouldn't smell like just completely vinegar, like this is getting close to a vinegary smell. That's intense. And then when you find that balance and you're ready to go and it's been fermenting for about 7 days, that's when you add your extra ingredients, your spices, your fruit, whatever it is. You can pretty much carbonate kombucha with anything. And then you're carbonating it and you're letting it sit out at room temperature for another few days until it is ready to pop. You can see right here. See that? Okay, great example. I put these Concord grapes in this bottle and you can see there's a little carbonation in there, but that needs at least 2 more days because what's happening is those acids and the yeast in here, they're continuing to eat that sugar, break down this fruit, and the byproduct of that is carbonation, is CO2 from the yeast consuming the sugar. So you're trapping that in here, and we just don't have enough right now. Like you don't want to drink that. That's whack. So we're gonna let that go for 2 more days. Let's see. What else? What flavors are definite no-go, Mike? You definitely don't want to use any
Banana.
You definitely don't want to use any fats. That is something that you don't want to use, like avocado and coconut. The acidity and the fat just don't mix, and it's just a big problem. It's going to give you some rancid flavors, so you do not want to use fats. But everything else is pretty much a go. There's so many crazy options in my kombucha course. I'll cover some of my favorite flavors, and also I'm going to take you along for the entire journey. One thing that's great is it's hard to really break down all of the intricacies and details for brewing incredible kombucha. So the course, I created a section that really takes you step by step on the entire process. So I'm actually holding your hand. There's daily check-ins on the fermentation because these are the questions that keep coming up. When is the proper time to actually pull your kombucha and carbonate it? These are the things that come up. So it's really a step-by-step guide. What else do we have?
Can you refrigerate kombucha while it's in first fermentation, or will it kill the SCOBY?
So, can you refrigerate kombucha when it's in the first fermentation, or will it kill the SCOBY? So, you do not want to put this is actually a great question, because most people think when it comes to fermentation, you know what, I'm just going to grab this because it's so good as a guide. Here we go. Here's my SCOBY hotel. Beautiful SCOBY hotel. Look at this thing. So most people think, they're not used to fermentation. This is hanging out at room temperature and they think it's a problem. I knew the first time that I started brewing kombucha, I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to keep it in the fridge because we think refrigeration is preservation, which in a lot of cases it is, but not with kombucha, because kombucha is actually a tropical fermentation process. So it doesn't like cold temperatures. It's not used to cold temperatures, and cold temperatures will actually damage the culture. So most people think, oh, I get my kombucha if I'm not, or my SCOBY in my culture, I'm not using it, I'm gonna throw it in the fridge and that's just gonna keep it dormant. You do not wanna put your kombucha culture in the fridge ever. It will damage it. It could potentially kill off the cultures because it's too cold. It's fine if it's for a day, like if you're shipping your kombucha culture, if you're getting a SCOBY online and it's shipping from a far distance, it's gonna be cold up in that airplane potentially, and that's fine. It can handle, a few days of cold temperature, but over time it will damage it. So what you do is you keep it out. This has been sitting out for I don't know, a year, this culture right here. And it's fine, it's healthy, it just keeps, it keeps building acids, but it is just gonna stay a little more dormant if you're not feeding it with sugar. So it's fine to leave it out. It's gonna keep getting more acidic and more acidic. That's why when you get your kombucha culture, say from online or for someone else, it might be really strong and acidic, which is totally fine because you haven't added sweetness to this in a while. You haven't added sugar, you haven't fed it, but it will stay dormant at room temperature for forever, for a year. Another question.
How do I stop the second fermentation? Also, I need the link.
How do you stop the link is in the first note. How do you stop the second fermentation? So I'm pretty sure the question is, well, there's two fermentations. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but the first fermentation is, the 7 or 10 days that I talked about before. When you add the sweetened tea to the culture, your kombucha actually ferments. That's the main fermentation. To stop that, you're really just taking some of that kombucha that's fermented and putting it in these bottles with some fruit. That takes you into second fermentation. That's the bottle carbonation process. Also the link is in the description of the video, by the way, so you can just point people there. So it takes goes into the bottle fermentation. So basically to stop it, you're putting it into the bottles and you're letting it carbonate in here. And then to stop that fermentation, that's when you can put it in the fridge because you're going to be consuming that, at least within a month or two. Eventually kombucha will go bad when it's in the fridge, but the idea is that once you pull it and you put it in your bottles, then you put it in the fridge and that's going to slow down the fermentation and you're going to drink your kombucha. What do we got?
How do you maintain your SCOBY hotel?
Oh, good question. SCOBY hotel. Look at this thing, by the way. Multiple layers. So a lot of people are probably wondering, what the hell are you doing with the SCOBY hotel? What is the point of having this thing loaded up with SCOBYs? And the idea of the SCOBY hotel, this is actually a great weapon to have as a kombucha brewer. In the course, I go into how to create the SCOBY hotel, how to maintain this. But generally, the idea behind a SCOBY hotel is you're loading up on SCOBY. So if anything ever goes wrong, which it certainly might. For me, I've had issues, especially early on as a kombucha brewer. I had some issues with fruit flies, just a process that went wrong and I had to start over, or I did put one in the fridge and it died off. So SCOBY hotel is great to just have extra SCOBYs. And also, this thing is sitting here, dormant, just building those acids, getting more acidic. So it really works to jumpstart your kombucha. So eventually your SCOBY and your culture, just like anything, has a life. And it will die out or slow down or get old. So it's nice to just restart with SCOBY from here plus some of this culture. And to keep your SCOBY hotel going, every few months, all it takes is a little bit of sweet tea. Just like you would brew kombucha, you pour a little bit of sweet tea in here. Same ratios for kombucha brewing. You pour it over this baby, and you're good for another few months, which is great. And this is just cool. Like, people come in and they see this thing, and they're just kind of amazed. Like, this looks like an alien life form. It's cool to have, hanging out in your kitchen. I like it, at least. And also, secret weapon of kombucha brewing. What else we got?
How do you get more carbonation?
More carbonation. The number one question I get for kombucha brewing. And, this is a bit complex because there's multiple elements to getting good carbonation. There's a balance of your actual brew between yeast and bacteria. But generally, it comes down, the two big mistakes that I see are, one, people not leaving enough residual sweetness from their first fermentation. So if you let it go too long, if you ferment it for 2 weeks and it's too acidic and there's not enough sweetness from that original sugar you added, then it's gonna be a lot tougher for your kombucha to carbonate. The second thing is just not letting it carbonate for long enough. And one of the main reasons you don't do that is because you're probably keeping your kombucha at room temperature, and kombucha is actually a tropical ferment, like I said before. So the kombucha likes a warmer temperature. So a lot of people put their bottles at room temp, and they let it sit there, and they think, they look at a recipe and it says, oh, 2 days it's going to be carbonated, and that's the issue with recipes. They're not getting into those specific details. They're not telling you about your environment and how to adapt to your own environment. And people follow those recipes, they follow those guidelines, and they think after 2 days it's going to be carbonated. But maybe their house is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and it's much too cold for a quick carbonation. So it could take a week. Could take 10 days if your house is really cold. So I think a lot of people just aren't letting it go long enough. Eventually, your kombucha will carbonate, but there's also a lot more details with the balance of bacteria and yeast. Yeast will help the carbonation. I'll get into all of that in the course, and really guarantee you have perfect carbonation, because for me, kombucha, it's just a fermented tea. Without carbonation and without these awesome flavors, it's not that fun. The carbonation, being able to make this carbonated beverage at home, is where it gets really, really exciting. And I want to guarantee you that you're going to get carbonation, because it's so important, and it just makes me mad that, not mad, it makes me sad that there's kombucha brewers out there that aren't getting perfect carbonation every time. Because now my only issue is having too much carbonation. And for me, that's not really an issue, because I would rather have too much carbonation. If you know how to control it and get it out, you're still gonna be able to drink your kombucha and you'll just let it settle. But having too little carbonation, well, that's a problem, and I don't want you to have that problem.
Have you ever made SCOBY candy?
Whoa, SCOBY candy. First of all, that's genius. I feel like I've heard of that before, but my brain just kind of exploded, because I'm thinking, so this person is referring to these babies right here, the SCOBYs, and you can actually, these are edible. And it's actually a great idea, because I have so many here, and it replicates every single time you get another SCOBY, and they're also sour. They have a great texture. Where else can you get that texture? So I guess the idea of candy would be like making a Sour Patch Kid. I do not know why I haven't done that. Who is that? Do you have their name?
Let's see. At Blackheads Boy.
Blackheads. Great name, by the way. Thank you for that tip. I'm 100% going to experiment with that and get back to you, because that sounds delicious. All right, we've got a poor connection on. All right, we're back on Instagram. Okay, what else do we have?
I have a lot of yeast at the bottom of my beginner SCOBY. Is that okay?
Really, really good question. So another thing that recipes don't get into, which is just more advanced kombucha brewing, is balancing that yeast and that bacteria, because that's what kombucha is. That's what a SCOBY is. It's a relationship between. It's actually a syntropic relationship. Most people think it's symbiotic, which, it's pretty much the same thing, but the yeast and the bacteria are working off each other. So the first process of fermentation is the yeast fermentation, where the yeast is consuming the sugars and converting it into alcohol. So basically, your first few days of fermentation, you're going to get a little alcohol byproduct. That's going to be the most alcoholic your drink is. It's not much, maybe one kombucha is like 0.05%. It's a very small amount of alcohol, but then the bacteria oxidizes the ethanol, the alcohol, and it converts that into the acid. So it's this syntropic relationship between the yeast and the bacteria, those two working off each other to create this beautiful, balanced, tasty beverage that's acidic, that's sweet, that's just awesome. That has all of these healthy acids in there. And then the byproduct of that is this cellulose, the SCOBY right there. So it's really important to get that balance. So to go back to your question, the yeast if you have a lot of yeast buildup, that's the dead yeast that is basically dying off falling to the bottom of your brew, and eventually that keeps on building up, and it can create an imbalance in your kombucha. Not to mention, if you have like a lot of yeast, a lot of brown spots by your SCOBY, that can create an imbalance as well. And it can create off flavors in your kombucha. And it's one of the reasons why your kombucha wouldn't taste as good as the store-bought, because that balance is off. So there's a few things, and it's a bit complex. I get a lot deeper into this question in the kombucha course, but you do want to clean out your kombucha vessel every now and then so there's not massive buildups on the bottom of yeast. And then also the way you actually heat your kombucha. You don't want to be heating your kombucha from the bottom, because you're going to be promoting yeast from the bottom. You're going to be promoting that yeast growth just from the bottom if you're heating that up.
How much light is too much light?
How much light?
Yeah.
Like on your kombucha,
Yeah.
I'm guessing? Okay. Good question. So the way an expert, I'll give a little shout out to Jeremy, expert fermenter, basically he told me one time that, fermentation is very similar to cells and biology, similar to human beings, where we're dealing with the same microbiology, where direct sunlight can be very damaging, just like to human beings. If you're sitting in direct sunlight all day, you're going to damage your skin. You're going to get a sunburn, and eventually it's going to get worse and worse and build up, and you know how that goes. Same thing with kombucha. You don't want it hanging out in direct sunlight. That's very damaging. If it's getting a little bit of natural light every day and it's not super direct, that's fine. That's totally fine. But you don't want it sitting out. Ideally, it's not in any sunlight at all. It doesn't need sunlight. So if you have a spot that's away from the sunlight, that's ideal. That's why I'm keeping my kombucha and fermentation stuff as far away from the light as possible, the actual natural light. So yeah, what do we got?
Can you mix champagne yeast with kombucha yeast?
Champagne yeast with kombucha yeast? Have no idea. I've never brewed champagne, and I'm sure you can. I mean, a lot of times there is it's just like anything, cross-culturing, cross-contamination. I'm sure you can create something crazy. I'm sure there's people out there doing it, but I can't answer your question because I have no idea. What else?
Have you ever tried mixing coffee and booch to make kombucha?
Okay, I haven't done that, but I met a brewer from New Jersey. What is it? What was their company? Forget the name of their company, but he was brewing with a coffee trained SCOBY, and that's what's so crazy about kombucha is you can get super advanced and super complex and very experimental. And somehow he mixed those two, and he had a kombucha that had coffee in it, and it was crazy. Not really my style, to be honest, because you're dealing with sour coffee. There's sour, I mean, that's why people like kombucha. It's got those healthy acids in there, and they taste good. But with coffee, just imagine the sourness with coffee. If that's your thing, then go for it and try it. But for me, it's like I'll just stick with these delicious fruit flavors. What do you got?
How do you identify mold? I got one white spot at the top.
Okay, so I get hundreds and hundreds of pictures. People send me pictures on Instagram, and this is a big reason why I created Kombucha University. I wanted to actually, have a place where I could give you the proper information on things like this. It's hard to answer all of your questions, but I wanted to guide you along every step of the way to show you what the proper fermentation should look like. A lot of people come in with that question of I have one white spot. Generally, that's fine. I cannot tell you for sure. I have not seen your kombucha, but usually the mold that you're gonna have problems with is colored. If it's red, if it's blue, that is a problem. And if that happens in your kombucha, if something goes wrong, then throw it out, get rid of it. But if there's a white spot, a lot of times your kombucha, your SCOBY will just give off a little spot that's just not, perfectly, like this SCOBY right here is totally white, and you might just be seeing like the start of that, the start of the white, and it just looks like a spot around all clear SCOBY, and that's fine. Most of the times that is fine. That's just the SCOBY looking a little different in its early days.
How do you not lose all your carbonation after you've opened it?
Okay, so good question. And this is a question obviously from someone who doesn't have an issue with carbonation, so they're doing things right, so good job on that. Number one, don't just open it like this. Do not just pop, never just pop it off and just let it go. When I give out a kombucha to someone, which this makes one of the best gifts, kombucha, just giving this out to a friend, it's incredible, but I have to warn people that you can't just pop the top, because there's no control to the carbonation. This isn't beer. You're not putting in the exact amount of priming sugar in here. So it can be a little difficult, but there's a skill that I've mastered where it's basically tilting your kombucha over a glass, just like this, and slowly releasing the carbonation through the corner, and it's just going to shoot out one side, and as long as you're capturing the carbonation, then you're going to be totally fine. It will settle and you can drink all of it, but just don't open it straight up. By the way, Instagram, we might die out soon. My phone is on 10%.
Battery's low here, and movie recording has stopped automatically, and some of them are still having trouble hearing you.
Okay. You back in?
No.
Okay. All right. We should be back in. Let's see. Let's see. All right. I think we're back in. Can someone just give us a little hit? The first time. Thank you.
Also, they hate the face tracking, and I don't know how to get rid of it.
Okay. We can turn off the face tracking. This is good, guys. First time. Tell me if let me see if I'm focused real quick. All right, we're still back at it. All right. Okay, no face tracking. We're back recording. First time this stuff happens. Okay, back to the questions.
Okay. Have you ever used kombucha in sauces?
So what I like using kombucha for is definitely just a vinegar replacement. This thing is filled with healthy probiotics, healthy acids, and just like vinegar. So it's great. You really, if you just let your kombucha go and you bottle that up, then you can put it in the fridge and you don't have to, you can just let it keep getting acidic, but you can use that just like vinegar. So I'll use it in a lot of salad dressings, or if I'm out of citrus, if it's winter, I'll just use it to add acidity to dishes, and you know how much acidity is needed in dishes for good tasting food.
What is the alcohol percentage of booch?
So the alcohol percentage of booch, that's a good question, is around 0.05%. Again, every brew is completely different. So I can't tell you for sure. And this is one of the biggest issues with the kombucha brewing industry, is that they have trouble controlling that. So it's hard to regulate it, and it caused a big stir in 2010. People, and this is another reason why you should brew your own kombucha, because a lot of times they pasteurize kombucha in the stores to get past these regulations so it can be in the stores. But generally it's about 0.05%, which I think is great. Alcohol is not bad for you if it's in very small amounts. And for me, it's not only good, I think it's an alcohol replacer for me, because if I drink a kombucha, it still gives me a feeling of drinking beer or champagne without consuming that much alcohol. So you would have to drink 6 of these, which is nearly impossible to even feel anything, but there is just a slight calming element from the amount of alcohol in here, and it's just such a small percentage. Again, 0.05%, and a beer is usually 3 to 8%. A beer can range anywhere from there, so 0.05% is really not much. So I like it as an alcohol replacer.
Um, Somebody asked if you're gonna combine classes for a discount. So sourdough.
Combine
and
classes?
kombucha.
That's a good question. So we're looking into figuring out a way to eventually combine the classes, and I'm working on more courses as well. So I think eventually there will be a way that you can enroll in all of the courses, because I want you learning this stuff. For me, this has changed my life. Learning how to bake sourdough bread, learning how to make kombucha at home. You save thousands of dollars. You eat this healthy stuff that's hard to find in stores, and you gain this skill for a lifetime that is just super beneficial in so many parts of your life. You get to give this out as gifts. You get to share this with your family. It's so great, and that's why I create these courses. So I hope if you really want to go deep into kombucha brewing, then click the link in the description. The course will basically guide you along on the entire kombucha brewing process, no matter if you're a beginner, no matter if you have brewed kombucha before. The way I set it up is, it basically is a streamlined process where we're going to start you in the beginner section. Well, first we'll set you up for success and really give you all the foundation, teach you what kombucha is, the right environment, the equipment you need. I'll teach you how to get started for under $50, which is fantastic. And then you enter into the beginner section, which is great, because that's where I'm guiding you along every single step of the way, which is something I could never do on a YouTube video. And that's why I created the course, because I put out like, I don't know, 7 kombucha videos by now, and I still get the same questions over and over again, which I totally understand, because kombucha brewing, there's these little intricacies, and it's new, it's fermentation, weird things are happening, and you might be a little confused. I certainly was, and I want to take away that confusion and really give you the confidence to brew kombucha at home. So the beginner section is all about that. If you're a noob and you might be a little nervous, and I don't want you investing in this unless you feel confident before you go in, while you're brewing, and after. You feel confident you're going to be brewing forever, and that's the beginner section. And then we get more advanced. We learn the science behind kombucha. We learn advanced techniques. So the advanced section is pretty epic, and for me, I keep learning about this drink. I keep learning new flavors, like this one right here, oolong white peach. So I'm really starting to experiment with new types of teas. We cover that in Kombucha U. Experimenting with different tea blends, and just getting a little more intricate with the flavors and the combinations there. So the advanced section is awesome. And yeah, I hope you enroll. Is there any last questions?
What's your favorite flavor?
My favorite flavor. Ooh. Right now, this oolong white peach is insane. This is actually a mixture between white peach and just yellow peaches. But really, my favorite flavor is whatever is in season. The best kombucha is always going to be the most seasonal, like when you're actually flavoring it. And for me, it's all about getting things that are fresh. The fresher the ingredients, the better the ingredients, the better your kombucha is going to taste. But I'm really loving this oolong tea. Oolong's one of my favorite teas, and I figured it would convert well to kombucha brewing, and it does. So whatever's fresh. And then I also like, messing around with some flowers, like hibiscus. I really like hops, so that's great. Anything else?
Can you tell what to do when you get too much yeast strings and the kombucha is getting too acidic?
I kind of covered that before. Again, it's a little complex, balancing the yeast and bacteria. Talked about that, the other question that I had. And then if it's getting too acidic, you can always just not bottle carbonate and just, add more sweetened tea to balance that out. But yeah, I think that seems like it's most of the questions. Remember to click the link below if you do want to enroll in Kombucha U. Again, I worked months on this course to really give you the confidence to brew amazing kombucha every single time. I'm actually guaranteeing that you brew better than store-bought kombucha, or I'll give you your money back, because I'm that confident. This drink is awesome, and I want you saving money. You brew a few bottles, and the course is already paid off. It's like, this is $5 right here. You buy this in the store, it's not gonna be as good as this, I guarantee it, and it's gonna cost $4 to $7, which is crazy. That adds up fast. And when you're brewing, one brew is like 10 of these bottles, so you're gonna save so much money. So click the link below if you're interested in the course and you really wanna learn more about kombucha. You wanna get in depth and you just want the confidence to brew great kombucha every time. The course closes on Friday, so make sure that you click the link below and get in there before enrollment closes, because once it closes, it's over for a few months. When I close down the course, that's all she wrote. But keep sending me your kombucha pictures. Tag me at Life by Mike G. I love seeing your brewing experiments, and so many of you are brewing kombucha, which is awesome. Remember to spread your kombucha to other people, spread your culture around, get your friends involved. I've heard a lot of cool stories about you guys inspiring, your friends, the people around you, your community. We're starting a kombucha revolution. This drink, I love drinking it. It just makes it, for me, like health-wise, I'm not gonna sit here and give you the exact science, but I just feel better. Digestive wise, like this is just such a digestive support. We all hear, gut health and all this stuff. All you need to know is this is good for your gut health. It's really good for the balance of the bacteria and the probiotics and just making everything feel good. It's such a digestive relief for me. I actually have an interview in the course with Alex from Pilot Kombucha, who totally, shifted her health from drinking kombucha and started a kombucha company, which is cray. So that's gonna do it. What?
Do you have, what do you do with mold and fruit flies?
Fruit flies, don't use cheesecloth. Do not use cheesecloth and you won't get fruit flies. Just make sure you have a good cloth like this. You will be fine. Cheesecloth is the devil when it comes to kombucha. Good for cheese. What do we got? All right. Do you need to maintain your SCOBY hotel? We talked about that earlier. See you guys.